Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special council meeting on October the 2nd, 2023. Individuals interested in participating in this meeting were able to register online using the delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. Any written comments received prior to the start of this meeting have been circulated and will form part of the public record. As we begin today's meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that this afternoon we're gathering on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Singh.
Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't say in the entirety of the item, but in caucus, but I may step outside as part of the discussion, so I thought I'd outline it.
And the reason?
Just family-owned, some real estate, close proximity of part of the discussion of that item. So again, I wouldn't say it's a general conflict, but I may step outside part of the discussion, though. But I'll still make note of the conflict.
Okay.
Land
7.1.
Yes. I was going to specify exactly.
Okay. Any other disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, we'll move on to the budget process and timelines, and there's a staff report there. Do you want to move that? Moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by, who's the vice chair? Sorry. Bill, sorry, Councillor Ioannidis. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll then move into the strategic session reports and the water infrastructure program, and we have several folks in attendance for that. Greg St. Louis and Boo Lam, and several other staff. So I guess I'm turning it over to Boo to kick things off. No.
Test?
There you go.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to present today on the water infrastructure program. Just before I get into the formal presentation, I just wanted to provide some acknowledgement to the senior and corporate leadership team, as well as several members of our subject matter experts as part of the advisory team, and all staff who assisted in providing data for the analysis of this report. In particular, I want to acknowledge Christopher Leishman, who's here in the gallery today and taking questions with us, who was the project manager on this water infrastructure program and consolidated and did a large part of the analysis that I'll be presenting today. Sorry. There we go. Thank you. So just a very quick overview on the water infrastructure program. The purpose of the water infrastructure program is to ensure that we have sustainable drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater services, and that's delivered through capital and maintenance programs that are appropriately funded through utility rates. And a lot of what the water infrastructure program does is tries to manage risk, looks at longer-term projections and analysis on how we manage our capital and maintenance programs for the long term. And we implement council-endorsed guiding principles of the water infrastructure program, which I will be referring to as WIP going forward. And those council-endorsed guiding principles are legislative compliance, risk-based approach, sustainability, affordability, and transparency. So all these are grouped into our water infrastructure program. So this water infrastructure program that we're presenting today is actually the second water infrastructure program, and I'd like to just take a moment to revisit the first water infrastructure program that was passed in 2018. That was a 5-year program from 2018 to 2022. It implemented largely a capital program that was focused on triple utility replacements that was stemming from a 2002 program called the Accelerated Infrastructure Replacement Program. As part of the 2018 WIP, Council endorsed a program to close the infrastructure gap, which was largely for end-of-life assets in drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater by 2044. The 2018 WIP also provided funding to close maintenance gaps in water and the stormwater utilities at $1.3 and $2 million each, and that funding for maintenance was going to be phased in over the 5 years. And really the goal of the 2018 WIP was to ensure that we could achieve regulatory compliance. But since 2018, there have been several impacts that we should mention, so COVID being one of the most significant ones. Another that we're seeing continuously play out right now is the macroeconomic environment. So we've had some challenges around supply chain disruptions, fuel costs increases, labor shortages, and all that really has kind of impacted on inflation and what we're seeing right now. And a good example of that and what we're seeing is the capital program, and the capital cost allocations are escalating quite quickly. We've seen about a 50% increase in tender prices over the last couple of years in a lot of our capital programs. And even with the inflationary impacts, we're also seeing several program gaps as part of our analysis. And just a quick reminder that the water, the wastewater, and the stormwater utilities, we own about 47% of the $7.5 billion worth of assets here at the city, so it's a sizable portfolio. There are regulatory gaps that we're trying to manage. There's also maintenance gaps, inspection gaps, as well as capital gaps. The regulatory gaps are mainly through changes in regulation. Specifically the asset management regulation, we've had a change in the consolidated linear infrastructure environmental compliance approvals. We've also seen regulation changes for locates, imposing stricter timeframes, as well as excess oils management. On the maintenance side, I kind of referred to the fact that in 2018's program, we were looking at closing maintenance gaps. Because of some of the impacts that we saw from COVID, not all of that maintenance funding to close those maintenance gaps were realized. So about 40% of the funding for both the water utility and the stormwater utility were not realized, and therefore we still see some of those maintenance gaps today, particularly around a lot of the inspection works, which again is stuff that we have to ensure that we maintain to be able to manage our risk, as well as legislative programs around things like oil grit separators, low impact development. And I alluded to our capital program, which not only has faced a substantial escalation in costs, but we're also noticing that the 2018 program did not capture all the assets that we needed to look after as part of our capital program. So this version of WIP also brings into the program some of those assets as well, largely around trunk sanitary sewers and pumping stations. Sorry, clicker's not working. There you go. There we go. So just a quick overview of the combined rates that we passed as part of the 2018 WIP program. The top row there shows the proposed rates that were approved through that water infrastructure program. And the first 2 years at 6.5% and the last 3 years at 4.5%. The bottom row actually shows the rates that were approved through the council process, and the area I want to draw your attention to is in 2021 and 2022. Those were years that were impacted by COVID, and there was a concerted effort by council at the time to keep rates low just to minimize the affordability impacts on customers. So those rates, those lower rates did have an impact on some of the funding that we've seen and some of the challenges we've experienced, but largely those challenges are really in the capital cost escalations that we're seeing. And this slide kind of shows that capital cost escalation. The blue trace is the CPI, whereas the orange trace is the tender prices that we've seen for our triple utility programs. And again, I'm just bringing your attention to 2022 and 2023. As you can see, the CPI is starting to level off and starting to trend downwards, but we're not seeing that same trend occur in our capital cost escalations. And CPI is often used as kind of the surrogate or the benchmark to gauge pricing. But one of the things that we should mention is that the CPI is not necessarily reflective of construction costs. And typically what we use is we use the construction price index. And the construction price index is showing that that trend of going down with the CPI is actually not being felt in the construction industry. In fact, a lot of those prices are stabilizing. So inflation is one of those key challenges, and especially the capital cost escalations that we're seeing in our program. But that's not the only consideration that we had for our 2024 program. We're also looking at a risk-based approach, making sure that we invest in areas of highest risk first before we look at other areas of investment. We're also addressing new legislative changes, which I had mentioned, that happened since 2018. We're advancing preventative maintenance and inspection programs, which we've seen the good that comes out of those types of programs, and there's lots of programs that are available within the utilities that could benefit from that additional maintenance work. And you know, this last point here is a point that we took very seriously within the staff team, is looking at adopting an affordability lens. Recognizing that the financial environment right now within the city is pretty challenging for residents. So making sure that our rates that are proposed are within that affordability lens. So just this slide here is talking a little bit about the triple utility WIP model. So this largely was the capital program that we had in 2018. The blue trace on the far left of the screen there, that shows what we were able to accomplish over the first 5 years or so of the water infrastructure program since 2018. And as you can see, we made pretty good gains in the first few years, but over the last several years, that has dipped below what our targeted rate model was. And the targeted rate model is in that kind of orange solid line that goes across. So what we've shown here in the dashed red line as well is what investments it would take for us to back up with those programs. And just to deliver that triple utility program that was proposed in 2018. Now that only accounts for the investments that would be needed for the triple utility program. It doesn't actually account for any of the maintenance work that needs to get done and any of the additional capital works that need to get done to meet both the legislative compliance but also our service levels. When you factor all that in, you know, that dashed orange line kind of represents a 12% annual increase year over year. And that 12% annual increase is only shown for some context in terms of how much impact we've seen to our program over the last several years. For further context, we've also provided that lower dashed black line, which kind of shows where our utility is trending right now. So if we were to continue on with what we're doing in 2023, we'd be significantly below what was originally proposed in 2018 to close that gap. So based on all those considerations, we are looking at a proposed rate option, or 3 proposed rate options that we're proposing. Again, just at that top dashed line, that's the 12% mark that I just spoke to. The 3 options that we're proposing, in option 1, it's an 8.6% option. That will essentially yield a 15% reduction from the targets that we had shown in the 2018 model. Option 2 at 7.6% is a 25% annual reduction, and option 3 at 6.3% is a 33% annual reduction. Now, all 3 options do implement maintenance and regulatory programs to ensure that we can meet those requirements of our utility. The most significant difference between those 3 programs really is in how quickly we respond back to the options. You know, one thing I will mention as well is that, you know, it is a long game in terms of trying to establish and trying to repair all the infrastructure. We don't necessarily have to try to do it all in the first 4 years of this WIP program, but what we should be looking at are those incremental investments to be able to get us back on track again. And these rate options, the 3 rate options, are doing just that. They're looking at more incremental increases to the program. So how that breaks down, looking at the rate option for option 3, which is at 6.3%, the breakdown on the left, which is the pie chart, shows that about 50% of that 6.3% is going to go to our capital program, 15% goes to a maintenance program, and a fairly large proportion at 35% goes to the regional charge. So that's the regional rate that gets passed on to the city. And how that breaks down from an impact to homeowners, in 2024, we're looking at $27 for the regional charge, 11 for water, 22 for wastewater, 17 for stormwater, for a total of $77 for the year. that roughly works out to about $6.42 per month. And a lot of the increases, again, that we're asking for are to offset the significant impacts that we're seeing from inflation. And this is just my final slide here, which summarizes 3 rate options that we're putting forward to Council for consideration today. Just a few highlights. We've broken down the rate increases that were proposed in each option to what the city rate is and what the regional rate increase is. So the regional rate increase is about 2.2% across each of those options. We've also provided the total cost impact for each household, the average household, I should say. And again, we've broken that cost into what the city portion is and what the region portion is. All 3 options will achieve regulatory requirements. It does also implement all the necessary maintenance programs as well as the resourcing of 11.5 FTEs over the 4 years to be able to implement those maintenance programs. Again, the biggest change in each of those rate options is the reduction in the triple-funded utility full road reconstruction replacements. So with that, I will open the floor to questions, and I just wanted to summarize again that that was just a very quick glimpse of the water infrastructure program that we've put together for 2024. We're seeking Council's feedback on the preferred option that's being laid out. And while decisions aren't being made today, we are looking for some endorsement or some support for us to bring forward a rate package through the budget cycle that's happening. So the project team for the water infrastructure program, including myself, Mr. St. Louis, Mr. Lushman, and Mr. Haggie are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that presentation. We have several folks in the queue with questions, and we'll start with Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thank you, Mr. Lamb and team, for this presentation. And it was great having the opportunity to spend some time and take a look into it earlier. So I really, really appreciate it. So the question that keeps coming back to me as I look at this is, what is our cost, our true cost, in not taking some big steps soon? Infrastructure is one of those things that gets more and more expensive. I don't see that, I know, having gone through COVID and the things that happened afterwards in terms of the costs going up, inflation, lack of skilled trades to do this work has really increased kind of the cost for now. But I'm wondering if you can touch on really what's our risk of not taking really quick and important action on this. Thanks.
There we go. Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, and through the chair. So the risk can be, the risk ranges. It can be significantly high if we don't undertake a lot of this work, depending on where our assets sit. So a lot of the work that we're doing right now is to prioritize where those investments are to manage that risk. One of the things that we see that is a significant need right now within the utilities is on the inspection programs. Unless we focus on the inspection programs and start generating an understanding of the condition of our assets and when to put those investments into those assets, that's where we're carrying the most risk. So for now, this program here looks to allocate funding to those inspection and maintenance programs to manage some of that risk. But ultimately what we're looking at is prioritizing our work, not only over this next 4 years, but over the next 20 years, to be able to put the funding into the right assets at the right time to be able to deliver our services most effectively.
Yeah, and maybe you can touch on the recent incident at Ottawa Street and kind of what that meant in terms of if we had maybe been able to do some work ahead of time, it would have helped.
Sorry, go ahead. Thank you.
Sorry, and thank you for the question through the chair. Yeah, so Ottawa Street was a trunk sanitary sewer. That was a very significant trunk sanitary sewer that serviced about 25% of the population of the city of Kitchener. 4 different pumping stations fed into that trunk sanitary sewer, where that flow would have then eventually gone on to the treatment plant at the region. So when that sewer collapsed, we had a significant event where we had to manage those flows until we were able to enact a repair. One of the challenges that we had was we didn't have a lot of inspection on that pipe prior to that collapse happening. In fact, actually, a lot of that infrastructure was still it was still not at the end of its design life. But regardless, we didn't have a lot of eyes on that trunk sanitary sewer. And because when it failed, that now enacted an emergency response that is now going to cost us a significant amount more to repair than if we had invested into ongoing maintenance into that particular asset. So what we're proposing now, recognizing that we don't have a lot of that information available to us in a lot of our system, we're looking at ramping up our inspection programs, being able to understand what's going on within our system, allocate the resources to those preventative maintenance measures to avoid these significant cost implications. As an example, the Ottawa trunk sanitary sewer, when all is said and done, it's going to be close to $6 million to enact that spot repair to the system, and that doesn't include addressing the rest of the infrastructure. So that is a significant cost that was unintended at the time.
Yeah, it really is. So I appreciate that answer, and I think that's really the type of thing that we need to be talking to residents about. So my last question will be on our communication plan. I mean, when we talk about, our water infrastructure program, it's not one of those headline-getting things that people go, wow, Kitchener, what a great WIP program you have there. So how do we get the messaging out about just how important this is and how taking these steps now are going to help us save money later?
Yep.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Ryan.
And through the chair. So part of this water infrastructure program that we're putting forward for 2024 and beyond actually has a component for enhanced community engagement. And some of those programs are doing exactly that. It's going to help explain the system better to our residents, to help them understand where those types of investments go. We're also going to be looking at doing more targeted communications campaigns. There are several videos already up on our YouTube channel for the city, and getting some of that outreach into the communities is definitely part of our communications plan going forward with this WIP. Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Lamb. I think I have to specifically congratulate yourself and your team on a very comprehensive, well laid out report. It outlines the risks that exist within our infrastructure, and at the same time, the necessary opportunities that we have to take to ensure safeguard the future reliability of that crucial infrastructure as well. Just in jest, I think, in asking how can we communicate more, we're going to tout the crystal clear water that we provide to our residents. The quality of our water, I think, in itself is the proof of why it's important for us to maintain this crucial infrastructure. With that being said, I realize that there are a number of options put before us. And I appreciate your adage of saying that staff looked at a sense of affordability. It's not just you're coming through a very pure science and an engineering perspective and saying, hey, this is a responsible course to take, and that's it. But you're realizing that there are realities of how to pay for that as well. So can you specify on, would you say the 6.3 is the staff recommendation on that basis? And if you can outline that, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. And through the chair, 6.3 is currently the staff recommendation. It is the rate that we feel that we could still deliver our services in a reliable way, in a reliable and safe way to our residents. It also gives us the opportunity to, again, through the inspection programs and maintenance programs, build up a catalog and prioritize where those other investments are going to go. And that gives us the opportunity to manage risks over the next 4 years and then put together a more comprehensive plan as part of the next WIP review to also look at the longer-term investments that we need to manage our capital.
Okay, so you're saying based on the staff recommendation, I know that you will only recommend what is the right course. You will not jeopardize the cruciality of our water infrastructure, is that the 6.3 will manage that to mitigate on risks for the next 4 years. Beyond that, we would have to reassess the program.
Yeah, and so all three options will have, at a very basic minimum, our ability to meet regulatory compliance and our ability to meet our maintenance programs. So regardless of what option is chosen, those are built right in. So the difference between the three options really is in how quickly we try to get back up to that 2018 model to repair our triple utility program. So at 33% reduction from that model, as part of option 3, what we're essentially saying is that we've made some really great gains in that program over the last 2 decades or so, to the point where we don't think that that's really the highest risk within our system anymore. What we're looking to do is take some of those additional funds, or the funds that we're asking for as part of this increase, and not necessarily put it back into those programs, but look at the higher risk programs. And where we see those higher risks are within our pumping stations, within our trunk sanitary sewers, and also within our preventative maintenance programs.
And you're saying we can manage to do that within the 6.3% recommended rate?
That is correct. As long as there's a realization that that does amount to a 33% reduction in the targets for the triple utility program.
Over the next 30 years?
Thereabouts, yeah. So over the next, what we've done is we've modeled it over the next 4 years, because this is what the WIP infrastructure program is, and it's going to be approximately a 33% reduction annually over the next 4 years. That being said, though, the inspection work that we're going to be doing and the prioritization that we're doing is going to help provide information on whether or not we need to either accelerate that program further, or whether or not, we might be able to scale back those timelines because the infrastructure might be in better shape than we had first anticipated.
Okay, just in a little bit remaining time, I'll ask, and I fully understand that this is a very speculative question, and it's really tough to predict how things will evolve in the future. But have staff taken into consideration of evolution of technologies and efficiencies that can perhaps not maybe reduce the rate from what we're projecting into the future timeline, but fasten the pace of us addressing some of that critical infrastructure?
Yeah, and through the chair, absolutely. So technology is one of those tools that the utility constantly monitors and sees what's appropriate for application within our utilities. So for instance, on the wastewater side, we are implementing SCADA, which is going to help us have real-time analysis and maintenance of our systems, real-time and monitoring of our systems to ensure that we're able to address potential failures before they happen. Also with technology as well, we're looking at ways in which we can implement some of those techniques that allow us to better assess our infrastructure and put the maintenance dollars in early so that we aren't faced with more expensive capital remediation or rehabilitation options down the road. So ultimately, yes, the adoption of the technologies will hopefully see some cost savings down the line.
Thank you, Mr. Lam, and to your team. And maybe one of my colleagues will ask the question about AI, how AI can perhaps predict some of those risks. But I'll leave it to someone else.
Thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Thank you, Mr. Leishman, for coming in, and thank you for the time spent during the past week to explain some of this. One of the things I noticed when we first introduced the WIP program was the positive effect that the maintenance and inspection had on curtailing and decreasing water main breaks. Personally, I would rather spend money proactively than reactively. Could you speak maybe, is there an average cost to repairing a water main break?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, every water main break is dependent, but it is a risk to the system every time there is a water main break. Last year we had 95 water main breaks. It's really dependent on the weather. We do a number of proactive turning of valves throughout the city and doing water main flushing, things like that, so we know that the valves work, so when there is a water main break that we don't break a valve or something like that. So those are proactive steps that we really do to ensure that the level of interruption to the broader community is reduced, and so that we're looking at just one area. So those are a number of things, as well as to maybe the clarity of the water. We're doing a lot of the flushing as well in terms of that to get out some of the debris that can be in the pipes as well. So, but in terms of cost, it would vary. Right now, we're dealing with a lot of sediment control cost, as when a water main, if it does erupt in the boulevard, that sediment could get into the sewer. And so what we have to do is put out bales of straw and protect the infrastructure that way. So there is added cost to it depending on where the break is, if it's in the roadway or in the right-of-way, and dealing with those type of mitigating measures for, especially the sediment control. That's one of the relatively new items that's raised the cost of them. Some of the mitigation has been 50, 75,000 just on the sediment control aspects, and writing reports to the Ministry of Environment and Parks.
Okay, thank you. And I think I know the answer to this, but with option 3, which you're recommending, you are okay, safe, and happy with the inspection and maintenance portion of that? Go ahead.
And through the chair, absolutely, yes. We have ensured that that maintenance program met our minimums as well as regulatory compliance, and we've built that program into every single rate option. So regardless of what rate option council decides to advance, we are protecting the health and safety of our community.
Okay, and I like what you said about the inspection program from this section will inform the next one. So, and I did want to kind of piggyback on what Councillor Johnson said about the communication program. So just take those points in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, Boo. One of the components of this, the 6.3%, is 2.2% coming from the region of Waterloo. If we're committing to or notionally committing to 4 years, I know we technically approve it every year, what assurances do we have from the region that their rates won't fluctuate from that 2.2%, or do we have any?
And through the chair, we don't have assurances from the region that it's going to fluctuate. We do work very closely with the region to try to establish what those numbers are, and what we build into the future forecasts are our best estimates. There's no guarantee, but we anticipate that's roughly where the rates are going to fall.
Sorry, I think Mr. Lautenbach wants to add something to that.
Yeah, so through the chair, the region does provide projected rates for 5 years, so we have a sense of where the rates will be, and they do update us every year in terms of whether they're going to stick with that or if there are changes. So we do get some heads up in terms of if there's material shifts. For the most part, they try to stick with what they tell us they expect those rates to be.
That's helpful, thank you. And within that 2.2% of the region, they treat the sewage, they treat the drinking water, and that also covers all of their own subsurface infrastructure of the water mains, et cetera, that they own?
That is correct, yes. So the region's responsibility largely is on the treatment of potable drinking water, as well as the treatment of wastewater. They do have some distribution infrastructure to get it to our pipes, and that's what their regional charge covers.
Okay, and I'm glad Councillor Schneider raised the water main break issue. There was a time ago we used to get some indicators showing the trending of water main breaks, and I remember there was a specific time a number of years back we were deeply concerned because we saw a short-term spike. But can we comment in general, can staff comment in general on how that's trending and if they are monitoring temperature variations with climate change, et cetera? I would think that big swings in temperature would raise the likelihood of water main breaks.
Through the chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Nash.
Just trying to pull the data here for, it does, really the big influence on water main breaks is the weather and how the frost gets in the ground and what time it gets into the ground. And so, like I said previously, we do have 33 breaks this year so far. The majority of the breaks obviously are in the winter. We do have some that are failures during the summer. So we believe that during the past WIP, we provided enough or additional preventative maintenance that it's really reduced the amount of water main breaks that we're seeing per year, and having the valve turning and things like that operationally will decrease the level and the cost of every water main break that we have if we're not breaking water valves. So just in general, speculation is that we are not seeing a large increase in the number of water main breaks over the number of years.
Okay, thank you. And last question, Is there a built-in, and part of the reason we're in this situation is because of the increase in building costs. Are we anticipating a flatlining of costs going forward because they've risen so much? Is there a built-in inflationary increase in the cost of construction? Can you comment on that?
Go ahead, Mr. Lamb.
Yeah, and through the chair, what we're seeing right now in the construction price index is that it's still staying fairly high relative to the CPI. So what we've done in our 4-year projection as part of this WIP is we have built in an inflationary amount into each annual year to account for some of that inflation. But they're more modest increases to account for future inflation. We don't anticipate the significant inflationary amounts year over year that we've seen over the last 2 years.
So modest amounts of inflation from present value?
From present value,
Okay,
that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'll have a comment as well, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Actually, go ahead now and make it. Just want to keep things moving along.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, just in terms of comment, one of the, well, I think I've said this several times, the most important job I think we have as council is to ensure the integrity of our water supply, both when it comes to us and when it goes back out, that it's properly treated, which is the region's responsibility, but we also have a role in that in ensuring that our pipes are clean and replaced. So this isn't an area that I fool around with. There are areas we can fool around with in terms of cutting back. This is not one of them. I'll be honest, I'm a bit concerned because I remember in 2018 we did take the, I'm going to say, budget route on this, and I'm a little bit concerned looking at the lowest option here as well. And the reason I say that is because I'm very cognizant of what's happening out there with other municipalities, and one thing I hate as a steward of this city is leaving the cupboard bare or leaving huge amounts going forward for other councils. And I look at the city of Hamilton, and their staff are actually, instead of putting forward 6.3%, are putting forward 20% water rate increase for this year alone. And that has to be a result of mismanagement, frankly, or council cutting back in the past. So I'm trusting staff on this one. I'm, you know, a 6.3% no one's going to be happy with. But at the same time, if that's something that our staff are coming forward saying that we can maintain going forward, I will support it. The last thing I'll say is I'm a little worried about increased inspection because, as we all know, once you tear back the drywall, sometimes you find that you have bigger costs. But I guess we'll deal with that in future years. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Davey. Councillor Clancy.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate the breakdown. I think you've kind of shown me behind the curtain, as you always do. I always learn something about stormwater, and I appreciate all the considerations you made in coming forward with these options. I'm always worried about the impact on some of our low-income folks in town, especially seniors on a fixed income and other low-income groups. And I just wonder if you can elaborate on how we can ensure as a city that we provide some relief to make sure folks don't have to choose which meal they eat or whether they can afford to stay in their home.
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
Through the chair.
Mr. St. Louis.
Through the chair. As part of this program, we are looking at doing a water rate review in future years. So as part of that, we'll look at how to establish or better establish programs to meet the needs of lower income families in our community, as well as we also have the water leak adjustment policy. So if someone has a leak that, for instance, a toilet or flapper that leaks or something like that, that they have relief that they can apply for that to get some compensation back, because some of those can go on for a number of days and be very costly. So there's that program as well. And then we also, as part of the gas utility, we do have the low-income LEAP program, affordability program that we provide funds into. And so that is really targeted for gas utility, but as our utility bill encompasses many utilities, members of the community are able to apply to that program as well.
Thank you. And do you foresee us being able to find ways to support folks who have these older appliances or older plumbing, that we can help them so that, you know, we offset some of these costs, either by fronting some of the capital for that or finding a way Because I feel like it's like energy poverty. I think we're talking about water poverty, where folks on a low income pay a disproportionate amount on their water, and they can't seem to bring their bills down because they don't have the money for a new toilet. Do you see something in the future that could help in that department?
Through the chair. We already have, or through the region, a WET program that, and we refer people to that, a number of people, to, so the region will come in and do a water audit of their premise and determine sources of leakage or efficiencies that they can make within their house to reduce their consumption of water. And so that's one step that's available right now, so you could at least identify where that source of water is leaking towards that. And so as part of the program, though, we're going to look at what other municipalities are doing for their programs and see if we can model what's best for our customers.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can include that in the communication plan so those who need it know about it. I know during our chat you mentioned that some of these increased costs have to do with provincial cuts, and I hear across the community that there's concern about rising property taxes. Can you speak a little bit about how there were some cuts from the province that might impact our this increase?
Through the chair, I think I'm not sure if it was cuts, but more transfer of responsibility through regulatory changes. So that's what we're seeing right now is a lot of transfer of responsibility for certain regulations. So a good example of that is the Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approval process. So previous to that, a lot of that was run through the ministry. But since 2022, that responsibility has been passed on to the municipalities across Canada, across Ontario to manage. So what that has essentially done for us here is it's created new responsibilities that didn't previously exist under any of the staffing responsibilities that we had. So we have had to create some new positions to be able to implement that program, and which has again translated into some costs back to the utilities. In addition to with some of the regulatory changes that we've seen on, for instance, the requirements around locates, that now is imposing certain deadlines on the city that are far more stringent than what have been in place in the past. And again, that's an additional cost that the city has to bear to be able to meet that regulatory change.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for this report. I just wondered, I was also concerned about the affordability drivers, and it mentions in the report that there are supplementary programs that you're going to look into. Can you share any ideas of what those might look like, maybe based on what other municipalities have introduced?
Yeah, and through the chair. So there are other municipalities that have adopted some affordability programs or are in the process of doing similar investigations to us. So a good example, Halifax Water, for instance, is looking at a way for them to generate revenue through their customer base to help with the low-income customers as well. So a good example of that is they're looking at an option of potentially having residents round up their utility bills on a monthly basis and taking that rounded up amount, putting it into an overall pot that then funds an affordability program. That's a potential option that we could look at, along with other forms of programs that might not only help with the affordability piece, but also help with the equity piece within our municipality.
Okay, thank you. My other question had to do with whether you anticipate any funding opportunities coming down from higher levels of government for, we had the big DMAF bucket, but are there any other options or, things that you can anticipate coming down in the next 3 or 4 years, whether for stormwater, water, or sewage?
Yeah, and through the chair, I could speak to maybe the stormwater side of things. I know that upper levels of government are looking at building greater and greater resiliency into municipalities, and they do this through grant programs. A large part of the grant programs, very similar to DMAF, are cost-shared programs, so they're not fully funding all of the capital, but we as a municipality have to allocate some of our own additional capital resources as well. For DMAF, there have been multiple intake programs. City of Kitchener has received a sizable grant from the federal government on that. It's $50 million on a $125 million program. And we continue to participate in that all the way until 2032. Right now, I know that we scan on a fairly regular basis to see if there's other opportunities for us to tap into some of that capital, either at a provincial level or a federal level, to offset our capital program requirements here within the city. And we'll continue to do that. And again, like I said, on the stormwater side, it seems as though there's more appetite right now to help fund resiliency measures within municipalities.
Okay, and of course with climate change, you never know what opportunities might arise, right? So, okay, I'm glad to hear you're on top of it, which I would expect you to be. Thank you, that's all.
Okay, Councillor Johnson, you've already gone once, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'll come back to you. Councillor Deneau, you haven't gone yet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, folks, for the presentation. It's really informative, to a person like myself who doesn't necessarily understand how everything all comes together as far as the funding and what our responsibilities are as a municipality. So thank you very much, and thank you to staff for recommending option number 3. Recognizing that people are still struggling out there. Small businesses are still having to repay back their loans from COVID, and so anything we can do as a city to reduce that burden on their wallets, I think is a good thing to do. My question is, so if inflationary costs come down, or I guess even go up, let's start with if they go down. Will that allow us to do more as far as like maintenance gaps and road reconstructions? If those costs come down, and vice versa, if they go up, will that reduce our ability to do some of the programs based on this percentage?
Yeah. And through the chair, so the inflationary measure that is usually used is CPI. So Consumer Price Index. So what we're noticing is that's not as reflective of the impact that we're seeing on our capital programs as the construction price index is. And the construction price index is still fairly high. So for instance, between 2001 and 2001 and 2002, the non-residential construction price index was more like 12.5%, so significantly higher than the CPI. So even though we're seeing the CPI go down, the inflation, it's really that construction price index that we're monitoring. And right now we're seeing that isn't necessarily showing the exact same trend downward as we speak. So the hope is that will eventually stabilize out. Hopefully it does go down, and at that point in time we will see larger gains on our maintenance as well as our capital programs.
Okay, and so if that would happen or occur, would you come back to us and say, hey, we were able to finish this much more of road, inspect this much more of our sewers?
And through the chair, so I think a lot of the work that we do, especially on the triple funded utility program, we look at what the unit cost is for a meter of road. So if we're starting to notice that trend in that cost is going down, we're able to do a little bit more road reconstruction than we had originally planned for that year. So absolutely, if that opportunity presents itself, we will advance our capital program to expend that additional budget.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Ms. Goldrick, you look like you won the draw between yourself and Mr. Chapman, so go ahead.
Well, through the mayor, just to emphasize around the iterative approach of the water infrastructure program, and as Boo said, we closely monitor tender pricing, look at what that allows us to achieve on an annual basis, and then certainly as we look at the next review for the water infrastructure program, and then reporting back into council in terms of what we were able to accomplish, what the gap is, and then with the new data that we'll have around what the condition of assets are. So it is very iterative. It's a long-term program, and we continue to collect information to help inform our investments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Inez, you haven't gone yet, have you? No, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thanks staff for for the comprehensive report that you put forward to the committee. I guess my question is, and it's a little bit piggybacking on some of Councillor Davies' questions with regards to the region. Part of their 2.3% increase, does that include their infrastructure, like the regional roads and all that stuff?
I see Ms. McGoldrick, and go ahead.
So through the chair, the region's rate is very specific to the region's water treatment, water transmission, and wastewater treatment infrastructure. Okay. One thing I do want to note, and I was considering weighing in a little bit earlier in the question, is that it doesn't cover the region's stormwater assets. And so it is just on the region's water and wastewater infrastructure, whereas the city's water infrastructure program incorporates all three water utilities.
Okay, so hypothetically, if the region's not doing an increase in their infrastructure, what kind of strain does that put on ours?
Go ahead, Ms. McGoldrick, or Mr. Lamb.
So through the mayor, certainly the systems are connected. So I'm thinking specifically around, for example, the water transmission system, which of course feeds the water distribution system. We rely on the quality of the drinking water that the region treats, and certainly they have responsibility for that. And then we maintain the disinfection through the distribution system. So certainly the quality of the pipes and the types of programs to promote clean water are certainly important. The areas where we've seen impacts perhaps at the customer level are related to regional valves and valve maintenance and the extent of disturbance when there's systems that we need to shut down to repair. That has been another area. So we work quite closely, and Mr. St. Louis and Mr. Lamb have great folks on their team that regularly meet with region staff to look at their maintenance and capital program and share what we're seeing on our side and what the region's seeing on their side to help coordinate.
Okay. That is a big concern of mine, because knowing how much the region's under pressure, for financial pressures for so many issues, I'm just hoping that we just don't go ahead and increase our level of service in improving our infrastructure, meanwhile the other levels of government are not. And I think there needs to be a little bit of a better coordination there. And Mr. Mayor, I hope you're listening.
Yep. Thank you. I'll pass that message on to my colleagues. Okay, we have comments now. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. And I just wanted to piggyback as well on what Councillor Davey was saying about, putting off this infrastructure funding. You said it so eloquently, and that's really where I was trying to get to before with my questions. Is that, this isn't something that we can put off. It's the type of thing that costs a lot of money. The longer it gets left, the more money it costs. And in some ways, our water infrastructure program and our team here does such a good job that when people in Kitchener turn on their water tap, it works. When they flush their toilet, it works, which is amazing. And you don't realize how well our civil engineering system works until maybe you travel somewhere, and then you're really, really comes back to you about just how important this is, and ours runs smoothly, and that's amazing. So we want to just make sure that this continues to happen, and I think it's kind of part of that communication program that we're looking to do too, is to really kind of put in there that piece about, it's important to be spending this money so that it's not costing us X number of dollars later as well. So thank you. This was an amazing report, and I really appreciated the opportunity to sit down and do a deeper dive with you and your team. Thank you so much.
Okay. Councillor O'Dooney, you haven't clicked in yet, so I'll go to you next.
It's just a comment, not a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to staff for this report. It was really well detailed, and the different options that you provided as well, and the conversations that we've also had. I have received emails with people already sharing their concerns around this. People are going through a tough time. As we make these types of decisions, sometimes I struggle in terms of where to go, what direction to take. But I mean, as Councillor Johnson said, if we don't put the money in now and do the things we need to do today, it will cost people a lot more money in the future to be able to do it. So I just want to put on record that these conversations or these decisions can be very tough sometimes, but I guess that's why we're put in these positions, to make these types of tough decisions. But thank you for the work that has gone into this, and you also thinking about the challenges that people are facing during these times and the options that you provided. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add a couple comments as well. Just the sense of how fortunate we are to have the level of reliability of our infrastructure, of the water that we drink, having surety that the infrastructure that we are trying to remediate and improve upon gives us the confidence that we can drink the water that comes through a tap, and more importantly, safeguards us not just in future tax dollar increases, but potential homeowner risk. Actual human waste could back up into our basements. Our basements, our homes could get flooded if you don't have the right type of stormwater mitigation programs in place. And of course, we've already talked about the importance and need of reliable drinking water, where many parts of the world are, don't have that fortune, but we do, and we also have a responsibility to maintain that reliability of that water as well. So I have absolute confidence in our staff and the team before us, that they have assessed those risks, and within the proposed rate, it will mitigate some aspects of that. And it's very clear to see the rate being proposed, 6.3%, is not the most absolute responsible step to take. That may be much higher to make sure that we can go a step further. It's taking into account the reliability, the reality of the day. And when it comes to increased pressures that our homeowners are dealing with, when it comes to inflation all around. And at the same time, we're paying a higher rate now because we paid a much lower rate a few years in the past. And that's why we have to anticipate there may be future rate increases that are beyond this rate as well, as we look broadly outward towards infrastructure. But I think this is the responsible step, but the reliable step, and I appreciate staff's recommendation with what's being proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for their hard work on this report. Water is something that I would argue we all take for granted. And, we turn our tap on and we don't give it a second thought. And the outline here, the options that you've given, I think they're fair and they're responsible. And I really appreciate that the work that Kitchen Utilities does. And it's good to know that we've got such amazing staff and experienced technicians behind us to make sure we all can turn our tap on with clean water. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I want to add to the thanks for the great research and information that was put before us so we can make a wise decision on this. It's too bad we had the pandemic. Things were going along very, very well, and if we didn't have to pause and slow down during that, we'd be farther ahead. But I believe this is a reasonable ask. There are challenges that we're facing, but I think the cost of not doing this at this pace will mean higher costs down the road. So I think it's responsible. I think this is going to be impactful and effective. And again, thank you for your hard work on this, and look forward to seeing the results.
Okay, those appear to be all the questions and comments. I too want to express my thanks to staff for the in-depth work that's been done on this report, and quite frankly, the approach that we've taken over the last number of years, which recognize the challenges and difficulties that people were facing, and try to reflect that in terms of the increases, by limiting our increases over the last few years. I think, as some have acknowledged, those challenges continue to be there, and I think staff have taken a balanced and prudent approach, recognizing that we need to make these critical investments. And while maybe a more ambitious target would have been better overall in terms of our infrastructure system, trying to strike that right balance and recognize the challenges around affordability at the same time, I think has been achieved, despite those challenges being out there. And so I want to thank staff for taking that approach. I will also just acknowledge there was the question from Councillor Chapman around the funding, and folks will remember that the former federal gas tax fund, which is now called the Canada Community Building Fund, and a number of other federal programs are coming to an end over the next, well, not the gas tax fund or the community building fund, because that one's permanent, but some of the other ones are coming to an end over the next couple of years. And there is a broad-based conversation happening with the federal government around that, and how the infrastructure challenges and other challenges that municipalities are facing will be dealt with. And so I would anticipate that this will continue to be part of our overall advocacy efforts in the next couple years in that regard. So with that, sorry? Okay, there is no motion for today. I mean, there will be a report coming forward, I guess, as part of the budget process with respect, but today was really a strategy session. So we'll move on then to the remaining items in the agenda. There's nothing in the mayoral business and updates today. There is a motion to go in camera for the two items listed. Somebody care to move that? Councillor O'Dooney, seconded by Councillor Davey. All those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. And we won't deal with three readings now because we may need to come back to pass a motion out of caucus. So with that, a motion to recess, moved by Councillor Clancy and seconded by Councillor Deneau. All those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you.